So the cultural group that Skylar and I did for our cultural population project is the Alaskan Natives. Some background information about the Alaskan Natives. An Alaskan Native refers to people of having origin of the native culture. This could be any person who has descent from North America or South America and still maintains tribal affiliation or has a community attachment. They are believed to have originated from Asia by either crossing over the Bering Land Bridge located in Siberia or traveling by watercraft along the shorelines somewhere around or over 30,000 years ago. Once Europeans migrated to North America around the 15th century, differences among the cultures caused misunderstandings and conflicts. So one example of the main differences was that the Alaskan Natives and Native Americans viewed the land as cultural purposes, and they thought of seeing it as something to use and not to own. And Europeans viewed land as having ownership and of people having territory. So Native cultures were viewed as more as a situation than as a promotion. So Europeans pushed the natives further and further into the Western territory that had not been discovered yet. And due to this, the natives deemed the Europeans as a threat and began to fight back with violence. So this occurred all the way up until 1906, when the Homestead Act had granted land to the American and Alaskan natives who have full or mixed blood. They were above the age of 21, who resides within the native district and who may be the head of the household that is inalienable and untaxable until further investigation. And this act took place all the way up until 1971. And in 1971, the Alaskan Native Claims Settlement Act granted 40 million acres of land and nearly $1 billion awarded to the Alaskan Natives. So because this was given and provided to the Alaskan Natives, the European culture had asked the Alaskan Natives to civilize, and they were practically forced into taking the steps to adapt to the European culture. In some ways that they did this was they provided boarding schools for Alaskan Natives and Native Americans, but this actually was to keep children away from their tribal settings to adapt more to the European culture. And they were also prohibited from speaking their native languages and were forced to speak English. So tribes generally believe in a higher creator titled the Supreme Creator, and the creator and other mediators can communicate between the spirit world and the earth. Alaskan Natives believed that people should attempt to maintain harmony with the creator and all factors of life. So spiritual factors could be people and animals, whereas more of the environmental or earth factors could be like rivers, plants, tribal grounding, so the earth, and other things like flowers and lakes.
So some demographics regarding the Alaska Native population. In 2014, when the census update happened, 18% of Alaska's general population identified as American Indian or Alaska Native, which is the highest rate for this racial group in any of the 50 states. The largest city in Alaska, which is Anchorage, has the greatest proportion of Native peoples among places with over 100,000 residents, and that is at 12%. 15.6% of Alaskan population identified as American Indian or Alaska Native in 2019, which is a drop from 2014 when it was at 18%. 5.7 million people in the United States identified as this in 2019, which is roughly around 1.7% of the total US population. And in 2010, the 78% lived out of tribal statistical areas. So some of that broken down is 22% on reservations or other trust lands and 60% in metropolitan areas, which is actually the lowest percentage of all racial groups for metropolitan areas. Excuse me. There are 574 tribes that are federally recognized by the US government, and 26.7% of Alaska Natives and American Indians spoke another language besides English at their home, and 84.4% had a high school diploma or higher education. And the median household income for this racial group is $49,906 a year. So some demographics regarding healthcare within this population: 51.9% had private health insurance, 42.1% had Medicaid or public health insurance, and 14.9% had no insurance at all. In 2020, the life expectancy at birth was 78.4 years and 81.1 years for women, 75.8 years for men. So some sexual assault demographics regarding the Alaska Native population. Alaska Natives comprise less than 20% of the total state's population. However, they still suffer more than half of the reported sexual assaults, which is 54%. And they have victim services, emergency sexual assault healthcare, and sexual assault forensic examinations, but they're unavailable to most of these small remote villages because they have a hard time getting there. And there's also a severe shortage of law enforcement officers within these remote isolated areas, and only 39% of Alaska Native villages are served by locally posted Alaska state trained law enforcement, whereas the remaining 61% have to wait days or even longer to get an officer to fly in from a larger community. And often a lot of evidence is destroyed or no longer viable.
Some health and illness statistics. So within the Alaskan and Native American cultures, they mostly believe in holistic ideals. So they do not focus on symptoms and diseases, but rather they focus on an individual as a whole. So the definition of health is a continual process of staying strong spiritually, mentally, and physically. Illness, the definition is the price to be paid for something that happened in the past or for something that will happen in the future. So each person is responsible for their own health within this culture, and illness is not seen as abnormal.
So methods of healing within this community, these are passed on through generations by visions, stories, and dreams. And healers are certain people within the tribe, which typically they're elderly people. They provide the healing services and they're taught the healing services, and they will later teach the healing services to the upcoming healers. There are no written guidelines within this community for methods of healing, so they can change or modify them to however they want. And it's different for each person being healed. So as Mahaley said earlier, they look at people as a whole versus signs and symptoms. So their methods of healing are going to differ for each person, and even the healer. They may have a preference of something they'd like to do. Some examples of things they use are herbs, ceremonies, and power. They also use sweat lodges, which is a dome-shaped natural building, and it's often used for purification of the body and mind. They use talking circles, drumming, ceremonial smoking of tobacco, potlatch ceremonies, which include feasts, dancing, and singing, and often they wear masks or other regalia like a chill cap blanket, which there is a picture of it to the right. They also use herbalism, the use of animal spirits, vision quests, and therapeutic massage, which is also called healing hands.
Some current healthcare problems within the Alaskan and Native American cultures. The American Indian and Alaskan Native people have long experienced lower health issues when compared with other Americans. So Alaskan Natives continue to die at higher rates than other Americans due to diseases like heart disease, neoplasm, and diabetes, and they also have a lot of unintentional injuries. The American Indians and Alaskan Natives continue to die at higher rates than other Americans in many categories, including chronic liver disease, cirrhosis, diabetes mellitus, unintentional injuries, assault, homicide, intentional self-harm or suicide, and chronic lower respiratory diseases.
And to the left, there's a chart of leading causes of death in 2005, and the three most common ones are diseases of the heart, malignant neoplasms, and unintentional injuries, which are shown throughout the text as well.
So the life expectancy of Alaskan Natives is actually 5.5 years less than the rest of the US race population. So the life expectancy for most Americans is 78.5 years, whereas within the Alaskan Native culture, it is down to 73 years. So lower life expectancy is due to multiple reasons, which could include like inadequate education, since they are in mostly small tribal land itself. They believe in their own education. They also have disproportionate poverty, discrimination in the delivery of health services. So they believe in their own rather than believing in what most Americans have adapted to. And cultural differences. So Alaska Natives continue to die at higher rates than other Americans. And like I have stated before, some disparities can include heart disease, neoplasm, unintentional injuries, and diabetes. So we actually found, while looking up healthy people, that there is actually a website called Healthy Alaskans 2030, which it is very similar to Healthy People 2030, but it focuses on the Alaskan population. And it has set multiple goals for the specific race of individuals. So Healthy Alaskans 2030 focuses its attention on the Alaskan Natives through multiple goals, such as the following. So chronic diseases, healthcare access, healthier weight, injury prevention, mental health, nutrition, physical health, and much more. And these were the primary goals set, but each of these goals had there was 32 individual goals that they wanted to focus on, which would focus on creating a better lifestyle by 2030.
Healthcare disparities within the population. Alaskan Natives continue to die at higher rates than any other Americans in some categories that we have stated previously. So preventable illnesses that include chronic liver disease, cirrhosis, diabetes, and chronic lower respiratory diseases. They also have a shortage of medical personnel, similar to the law enforcement situation. Tribal communities suffer from medical personnel shortages more than any other communities, especially because they live in remote reservation locations. So there's a lot of travel that needs done. Alaska Natives also have an infant mortality rate that is 60% higher than the rate for their white counterpart, which is a large amount of infant mortality rate compared to the others.
So Healthy Alaskans 2030 seeks to improve multiple healthcare disparities by the year of 2030. So one improving factor Healthy Alaskans are seeking for is women receiving prenatal care, especially within their first trimester. So like as Skylar stated in the previous slide, 60% of infant mortality occurs within the Alaskan populations, and Healthy Alaskans 2030 believe that if they have better prenatal care during the time of their pregnancy, this could help to improve that number by lowering the amount of infants that unfortunately pass. So some other health disparities that Healthy Alaskans seek to improve on is by reducing the percentage of adults that state that they cannot afford to see a doctor, reduce rate of preventable hospitalizations, and increase percentages of young children for wellness checkups.
So here we have 4 videos. We're going to watch 3 of them because the second one, cultural influences on healthcare decisions, is 27 minutes long, but you can watch that if you'd like to learn more.
We know that the different types of cancer in American Indian Alaska Natives actually vary by regions. Here in the Northern Plains, lung cancer is the highest, particularly among women, and that's primarily due to smoking. There is a ninefold difference in lung cancer mortality in the Northern Plains compared to tribes in the Southwest.
Indians are not a homogeneous group. There are over 550 federally recognized tribes, and many tribes that are not recognized by the federal government. And it turns out that the cancer patterns among these natives nationwide are really quite different in some areas.
I trained at the University of North Dakota in the Indians into Medicine program back in the 1970s. And at the time, they said Native Americans didn't have cancer problems, and I just accepted that. But as I got into practice in North Dakota, I myself was seeing a lot of Native women with breast cancer, and particularly younger women presenting with more advanced disease, and many of them dying prematurely. So I started to challenge those statistics. What we need to do is engage the communities themselves, give them the data that they need to help address the problem, and find out if they have certain knowledge that maybe we could all work together towards common goals of prevention and earlier detection.
Ceremonial tobacco has a special role in many American Indian communities. And because of this, we have to develop culturally relevant materials for our tribes in terms of cessation. We've been working with traditional healers on the Navajo Nation for probably about 10 years or so, and we know that they have a huge role in the community as leaders. We put together information that was culturally relevant for traditional healers back on Navajo Nation, and through these efforts, they've been able to make a decision on their end to pass resolutions to prohibit the use of cigarettes in their ceremonies.
Here in New Mexico, almost 20 to 30% of the state lives in rural areas. And these are things that influence the burden of cancer. They can influence how you see healthcare, how you approach healthcare. They can affect things that you're doing, how you're living your life, whether you're exercising, what kind of a diet you eat. These are all things that influence the burden of cancer. And how you access healthcare can influence how you're going to do with that cancer once you're diagnosed with it.
It seems to come down to access to screening, knowledge of the community about going for screening, and timely referral. Because if women had an abnormal mammogram and had to wait to get referred to a contract care facility, such as where I was practicing, that delay might significantly affect their ability to survive.
Our challenge is to characterize the burden of cancer among these diverse populations, to bring that to people's attention, to see where the resources are needed to address cancer disparities, even identify what those cancer disparities are, and then hopefully guide us to what resources can be brought to bear to help us diminish these disparities.
That was the first video. The second video we're going to watch is a drum circle video. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but you'll get the idea. So that was a little video on their drumming circles. And the last video we're going to watch is on sexual assault healing within the community.
We offer this smudging to our victims just so that they can get some strength, some understanding of what's going to happen next, what we're going to do for them, and to try to help them feel safe and have that safety net for them. Our strongest resource is our culture and our spirituality.
We have healing ceremonies that can address different aspects of the trauma that one goes through when they experience sexual violence. But the challenge is incorporating that into more Western systems. How do you integrate the cultural and spiritual with something that's really foreign to our community and our population? I think one of the keys is having individuals that really understand that cultural value and cultural importance of integrating our ceremonies and healing into the work that we do.
I keep pushing the culture because we have the ability to address these victims in a holistic manner. I can take them to a ceremony, address them holistically, sing for them, calm their spirit, give them a proper orientation as to what happened to them. Not only that, but train them to learn how to let that go, because no matter what they do physically, they can't go back and change anything that happened to them. We recently built a sweat lodge here for the Children's Justice Center, and we use the sweat lodge as a form of calming the spirit, to call their names, to bring their spirit back to the center, which is absent from a lot of the families on the reservation.
We have to have hope. We've been here a long time, our people, and we're survivors. We can survive. We can survive.
And that was our last video. Here are our references, and that's all.